Hello everyone, my name is George Slatkovsky and today we are looking at a new update for my plugin for Maya, JS Toolbox. This will not only be an update video, this will also be a full tutorial video because I haven't recorded one yet. So yeah, we will look at all the features and new ones and old ones as well. So if you're only interested in the new features, you can find them in the description with the timestamps that marked new. So you will see that in the parentheses new, and you can just click through them and listen only to the new features. But if you want to see the full tutorial, just proceed with the tutorial. So thank you for watching. So starting up right away from the installation or update if you wish to update. So you will get this folder over here. What you need to do is to unpack it somewhere like that and go inside and open this README file over here. When you open this README file, you'll see that there are instructions, but we will cover them all. What you need to do now is to go to your documents folder. For example, mine one is username, OneDrive documents, but yours might be like just a documents folder and that's it. Now, the most important thing, you need to go to Maya and then the version of Maya. In my case, it's 2019, but yours might vary. And now to scripts. So when you found your scripts folder, just open it and go back to your folder with the unpacked folder of Toolbox. Just copy the entire folder. You see there are a bunch of files here. You want to copy this folder entirely and paste it into version of Maya scripts like that. And that's it. You just open this folder, open this README again if you closed it, and just copy this command over here. Now what you need to do is to place it in your Python field over here. You just need to switch it from Mel to Python. You need to paste it and click enter. And that's it. You have installed the plugin. Ignore this small visual glitch. You just switch tabs and that's it. And also you will not have those empties over here because that's from my other plugin. So now you just need to open the plugin with this first button over here. And here you go. You have this nice looking menu that you can dock everywhere you want, like that. You can resize it, of course, and everything should work just fine. The other two buttons is reset to factory defaults. This third button is just closes the menu and ensures that there is nothing running on the background from this menu. So if something goes wrong, just click on this button and open this menu again. So in this new version, we have a fully rewritten UI over here. As you can see, it looks almost the same, but it acts a little bit differently. If you resize the menu, you'll see that first of all buttons are stretching properly, not like the previous version. And also, if you have more real estate over here, it will just expand the text and maybe it will be helpful for you if you don't really understand the function. You'll just expand the text and you'll see that this is Boolean intersection, for example, this is Boolean difference, and so on. So you can just expand it. And also, if you, for example, dock it somewhere over here, under the outliner over here, you will be able to actually scale this properly to this size, and we have outliner on the top. So this is very useful. So let's go straight to the tutorial. So this menu is divided into a bunch of sections over here. So the selection over here and selection sets, the creasing and beveling section, mirroring and arrays over here, instancing, store edits and delete node and this stuff is basically a utility, and it goes down to combine, separate, duplicate, extract. This is all the utility functions, Booleans over here, and also live plane. This is basically construction plane with live mode enabled, and it also has a bunch of other things that we'll discuss. And also the last section over here is your materials, the quick materials slots over here, where you can store presets, you can open your normal materials here, and also you can create matcap materials here as well. So right after the initial installation, you can also find all of the hotkeys over here in the Windows settings and hotkey editor. You just open it up, custom scripts over here, GS Toolbox over here. And as you can see, almost all of the functions that we have on this plugin, we can also hotkey them. So mirroring everything, array and instancing everything that you want, there's a bunch of hotkeys over there. So what we also have with this update is brand new online documentation that you can find in the description, or what you can do, you can open it through the menu. You just go to Help, Open Online Documentation, and it will open this documentation, and here you can read and see. As you can see, this most of it is animated. You can see all of the functions that this menu has, and you can always return here and look at stuff manually. All right, so let's go from the most interesting part first, creasing and selection. So first of all, let's go with the interactive selection. So I have this model over here, and as you can see, the geometry is already a little bit dense. And if I want to select, for example, some of the edges, actually take quite a while for me to select all of the edges, for example, to bevel something, right? Or just select and like do other things like harden normals or something like that. So instead of manual selection, what I can do, I can dial this angle over here, for example, for 50, and click select edges, and it will select all of the edges based on the angle between the faces. Now, this is all great, but if you don't know the exact number over here, it can be quite hard to select only the edges that you want. So what we have here is interactive edge selection. You just click on this angle button over here, and as you can see, all of the edges that will be selected are now highlighted, just like that. And you can actually drag this button over here and interactively change the selection. Well, it's not really a selection right now, it's just a highlight, but if you, as you can see, this button is now highlighted. If you now select this button, it will finish the selection and you will have your edges selected, and you now can do any functions that you want on those edges. So that's selection. Now let's go to creasing. So now that we talked about the selection of edges, let's talk about creasing, because those workflows are connected. So what creasing does, it basically applies a parameter to the edge or sometimes vertex, and it ensures that this edge will not be smoothed until some fixed level of subdivisions. For example, if you apply a crease level of 3, that means that up to the 3rd subdivision level, this edge will not be smooth. But as soon as you go to subdivision level 4, this edge will start to smooth. And this is very useful because you can apply a bunch of subdivisions with the sharp edge, and after that smooth this edge a little bit, and it will give you this natural look to it, not very sharp and not very smooth. So let's see, we have crease and uncrease buttons over here. Those are selection based, so you need to select edges or faces and apply this crease. What this button will do, it will look on the crease level over here and apply this crease level to your selection. So for example, I want to apply crease level of 3 to this edge over here. I will just select this edge and click crease. And as you can see, this edge is now creased to the level of 3. Now, for example, I want to apply crease to face selection, right? So I will just select those faces and I will click this crease and As you can see, the perimeter of those faces is now creased. Now you might notice there is a small triangle over here or arrow. It shows that this button has a shift modifier. So if you, for example, select those edges and hold shift button and click on this crease, you'll see that all of the edges are now creased. So those are just like two modes of this creasing button. Uncrease is the same thing, it just removes the creases. It also has modifiers, so you can remove the creases from the perimeter, or you can remove the crease from all of the edges in the selection. Same thing goes for edge selection, so it will just remove the creasing over here from this edge. So that's great. This is a manual creasing and it's very useful because you will have to do some manual creasing. But let's talk about automatic creasing now. As you saw before, we can select edges by angle, but we can also crease those edges by angle. For example, for this model, it's perfect because it has a very nicely defined sharp corners over here, and you can just select this angle tolerance over here, dial it as you want. So, for example, I want this edge to be selected as well, as you can see. Whoops, like that. This edge should be selected because if I go too far, it will deselect it. And now what I need to do is just press this crease plus button, and that's it. It will apply creases to your edges based on this angle. And now if you subdivide this thing, you will notice that you have almost perfect subdivisions. Well, there are some pinching over here. That's because this edge is trying to smooth itself, and over here edges are sharp. So this is just a topology issue. As you can see, all of the edges are now creased. Now, if you want, for example, to uncrease some of the edges, for example here, right, this edge, you just go select this edge, uncrease, and now if you subdivide it, you will see that it has a nice smooth fall off over here. Now, uncrease plus button will simply remove all of the creases from the model. Just click on this, and your creases are now gone. This model will be smoothed fully without any creasings. So great, crease is very powerful thing. It's not a complete replacement for control loops or maybe bevels, but in my opinion, if you can use creases, you need to use creases because they will not modify your topology. They will allow you to continue modeling. That will always ensure that you can go back. So here's another example of model that will benefit from creasing workflow over here. So you just need to select the angle over here, find the appropriate angle. I think it's already there. Let's just go a little bit lower. We can? No, we cannot. As you can see, I want to capture this edge as well, but the angle is too small over here, so let's just crease it and then manually go over here and crease this edge as well, if you want that. If you don't want that, you just uncrease it and that's it. As you can see, very easy and very fast. By the way, I forgot to add that Crease Plus will also apply subdivisions to your model based on this slider over here, so it will do a lot of things automatically. Now let's talk about Bevel Plus. This is a very similar function because it will only apply bevels to the edges that matches this angle tolerance. So it's a bit destructive because bevels will add geometry to your mesh, but it can allow you for a lower subdivision levels. So for example, if I have the same angle over here and I will just click on bevel, you will see that all of the edges that matches the angle tolerance over here will now be creased, and I can just increase this bevel a little bit just to have it a little bit rounder like that. And as you can see, it gives you a bit cleaner result, maybe a bit sharper result over here. I think it looks nice. Now going back to those sliders, as you can see, we can also activate Sub-D slider and Crease slider. Those sliders, why do we need to activate them? We will apply this Crease Plus over here. As you can see, not all of the edges that I want are now creased, but maybe I just want a little bit of creasing over here, right, on this edge, and a little bit more over here. So what I can do, I can select this edge. Geometry is now in the subdivision preview. I can select crease, and now, as you can see, it's still on the number 3. If I select other edge, it will go to 0 because we have 0 creasing on this edge. Let's select this edge and start dragging this slider. And as you can see, as I drag this slider, it will start to smooth this edge a little bit. So I want, for example, 1.5, right? Like that. And let's see how it looks. And maybe same thing for this. This looks much better. And for example, I want to increase or add a little bit of creasing over here. For example, 2. Yeah, for example, like that. As you can see, it's still editable. It's still just your regular geometry over here. You can do whatever you want with it. And we can also just remove those creases and begin to model this thing again. Now, the sub-D slider will just change the subdivision level of this preview. For example, let's just go to Crease and let's change the subdivision interactively. As you can see, I'm removing subdivisions from the mesh, or I'm adding subdivisions. And this sub-D level button with the number will simply show you the amount of subdivisions you have on your mesh. And you can also click on this button to manually add subdivisions in the non-interactive mode, for example. So let's say, for example, I have a model with creased edges, but I want to convert them to bevels. Now, it has some limitations, but you can convert creases to bevels in one click. Just hold right-click on this Crease plus button, you will enter a marking menu, and you will see that we have a function called Convert Creases to Bevels. And just click on it. And what you will notice is that all of those creases are now bevels. Just like that. Now, the limitation is it will not look at the level of creasing on your edge and apply different bevels. It will not do that. It will apply one bevel with one amount of segments to all of the edges. So that's a limitation, and it's a limitation of Maya, unfortunately, because the bevel node cannot have different selections, for example. Only one option for bevel. So now you can convert creases to bevels. Now you might have noticed that there are other options here, crease sets from mesh and bake crease sets to mesh, and also subdivision and crease presets over here. Let's just delete this. We'll talk about this button later. Let's just delete the bevels, delete the creases, and for example, apply creases again. And now I want to select those creases. If I apply manual creasings like that and then try to select based on the angle, of course it will not select those edges because they do not match this angle tolerance. What I can do, I can convert those creases to a set. So create crease sets from mesh, and you will see that we have cylinder 87, crease set 1, and those edges are automatically selected. Now, if you have different crease levels on your edges, you will have one crease set for each crease level you have on your mesh. So right now I have only one crease level and I have one crease set. To delete this set, just bake it back to mesh like that. As you can see, the set is now gone and you still have your creases on your mesh. So now let's talk about mirroring. That's a very important function in any 3D package. And in Maya, unfortunately, for the mirroring, you need to go quite a few menus to actually find this. And also you need to open options, start clicking on a bunch of menus and try to remember what you selected and everything else. That's great if you want to do something very specific, but when you actually need to do something simple and fast, you have these mirror options over here. They are very intuitive, very fast, and they also support multiple objects selected. So let's see. First of all, I have this shape over here, and for example, I want to quickly mirror it to the other axis over here. It's in the middle of the world. So what you can do is just simply select this object and mirror it on the -X. And that's it. Here you go. Very fast. One button, normal, world, merge, and cut geometry option, and one button click over here. Now, next thing, that's just normal mirror. For example, I want to flip this thing to the other side. I can just select flip, -X, and now this thing is flipped to the other side. Very fast. If I click this again, it will go back. Now, instancing. Now, instance with mirror is very important in Maya because we do not have a procedural mirror here. So we can use instances as procedural mirror modifier. I just select instance -X, and now this object has an instance over here. And if I modify this object somehow, for example, I will extrude this face, you'll see that this object is now also modified. So this is very useful, and you can always delete this instance and just reapply it if you want. Now back to the other options. We have world, object, and bounding box. What that basically means is that command that you want to apply here, normal, flip, or instance, will look at the world coordinates, object coordinates, or bounding box of the objects that you try to mirror. For example, let's see. Right now in the world coordinates, this object will be mirrored based on this axis over here, on this plane, world plane. But if I, for example, want to mirror this object on the local axis, right? So I just want this thing on this side over here. I can select object, and now it will not look on the world coordinates, it will only look at the pivot. And as you can see, we have a blue arrow over here. That means that it's a Z axis. And as you can see, it shows that it's Z plus axis because we can see this arrow, and this will be Z minus. And I can just click on Z plus, and as you can see now it will mirror this object perfectly to this other side. The only thing to remember is that you need to have your pivot set up correctly, because if it will be in some weird location like that, if you try to do this, you'll see that we have some other effects. Maybe you want to do that, maybe you don't want to do that. You need to know that you need to have your pivot set up. Now, bounding box is much easier to remember because it will actually draw a box around your object over here and mirror based on that box. So let's just demonstrate it. For example, if I try to do X this way or minus X, you will see that it actually found boundaries of this object and basically mirrored on that side over here. So the other options here are merge, bridge, and nothing. So they only affect the normal mirror that you have over here, and merge will basically merge vertices on the mirror axis when you actually cut it. For example, if it's not perfectly in the center, it will cut this geometry, mirror it, and also try to merge the vertices on this plane over here. If you select bridge, let's switch to this one, it will try to close the border around the object, open border, with a bridge function. For example, if I try to mirror this to minus X, like that, you will see that we'll have a bridge between them. So this can be very useful as well. And nothing will basically do nothing. It will just mirror it, and that's it. It will not try to merge it. It will not try to bridge it. Just this. Now, let's talk about this merge because it has a bunch of options inside. So, for example, this detail over here. For example, if you bridge it like that, you will see that it will see that it mirrored just fine, but sometimes if this thing is perfectly on the axis, like that, on the plane over here, sometimes you will get some stray vertices over here, so they will not be merged. So what you can do is to either select this auto option, by default it's disabled, or change this merge threshold. As you can see, you can type a number or even change it manually. For example, if I go like this, it will look at the vertices in a bigger radius around it and try to merge them together. So if you have any issues with the vertices over here, just try auto or change merge threshold. Now the other options for the mirror function is cut geometry or delete geometry. Now cut geometry, as you saw before, if I, for example, have this object like that, and if I, for example, extend this edge a little bit over the axis, if I disable cut geometry, it will not cut this geometry. It will simply mirror and flip this geometry to the other side without any other options. As you can see, now we have this weird result. Maybe you wish to have it like that, but most of the time I just use this cut geometry because it will simply cut based on this mirror plane. And as you can see, now it's perfectly fine. Now the delete geometry, you already saw how I use it. You can delete one side of the geometry, and it has also world, object, and bounding box options. So you can just select world, delete geometry, and delete one half of the geometry based on that mirror plane. Alright, so let's talk about instancing really quickly. Instancing is a very important part of Maya, as we already discussed in the mirror. But in this menu, you can really quickly create a bunch of instance objects on the axis that you want. and also with the options that you want. For example, I have this object over here and I want to create a bunch of instances to maybe place them around the scene. So for example, I want 4 instances, and I can type 4 instances and click on the instance button. And what it will do, it will create 4 instances of this object that are, of course, editable and fully functional. So you can do something like this, and the edits will propagate to other objects as well. So that's very useful. You can select the number of instances, you can select the axis if you hold right click on the button, and also you can, instead of instancing, for example, you can copy the object, or you can copy it with the history. It will basically just copy this object with this construction history, so you can edit this history later. And also you can select no offset. This will create instances in the same place as the original object. Offset will offset them a little bit based on the bounding box, as you saw before. And offset plus gap will add a small gap between the objects, so they are, for example, easier to select. Also, we have randomized transforms. We'll talk about this a little bit later in the context of snap to poly. So before I told you that we do not have a proper mirror modifier in Maya, procedural mirror modifier, but with this plugin you can sort of mimic this modifier, and if you use instance plus, for example, this is a special type of instance, you can mimic this mirror modifier thing and also a bunch of other things. For example, so let's try this instance plus. So we select the object, we apply instance plus, and as you can see, this button will now change. You can now apply this instance plus, and you have a selector over here, mesh and instance. So when you select mesh, all of the options that you select in this menu, all of the functions will be applied to the mesh directly. But if you select instance, the highlighted functions will be applied to instance plus. So for example, let's try the mirror modifier. I select the instance plus over here and I mirror to -x. As you can see, basically nothing changed on this object. But now if I try to edit this object like that, you will see that we have a procedural mirror. It's similar to instance, to normal instance, but the difference is it's basically connected object. As you can see, you can rotate it, you can scale it, you can do whatever you want with it, and it's still instanced like that. And also it supports Booleans, the Booleans from this menu over here. We'll talk about this later, but this is an instance plus. You can also apply Solidify modifier, and you can delete mirror modifier using delete node. So for example, using this plane, we can create instance plus like that. We can apply Solidify modifier because we have instance selected here. It's now applied Solidify. Let's just change it to, for example, thickness, a little bit of thickness. And now you will see that this object is now fully procedural. If I select this edge, it's still just a plane, and then extrude it, you will see that this extrusion is now procedural, and it's actually applied to the instance plus, just like that. And it will maintain this Solidify modifier, so you can change this object if you want, and it will still work just fine. So this is one of the uses for instance plus. So now let's talk about store edits and delete node, those buttons over here. The way Maya stores the edits in the mesh is by construction history. But the thing is, not every edit that you make to your mesh is actually stored in the node. Sometimes this edit is stored in the mesh itself. For example, vertex edits. If you move edge, face, or vertex, those edits will not be stored in the separate node. It will be stored in the mesh itself, and this can be very hard for procedural workflows because we do not have node over here. So what we can do, you can select this object over here, you can store edits, you can now apply some edit, just move the geometry like that. You can now store this edit again. As you can see, we have tweak and sometimes polytweak, but now we have those edits stored in a node, and that means that we can use our second function, delete node. So sometimes you can notice that when you select an object, you will see that store edits for some reason is highlighted. That only means that this object has no edits initialized, and this can break this delete node function. So what you need to do, you just select this object, you see this white outline over here, you just click on the store edits, and that's it. You don't need to do anything else. So as you saw, I've applied some edits over here, and now I want to delete them. I want to revert those edits. Now, if you don't have a node over here, you cannot revert this. But now we have node, and we can just click delete node, just like that. It will delete one edit that we had before, and delete node again. It will delete another edit. And now if I continue to click on delete node, delete, 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 as you can see, I'm clicking, I'm going back to the way our mesh was before our edits. And you can just simply continue edit it like normal. So as you can see, we forgot to add another, delete another extrude, like that. Now you can edit this mesh again, and then if you don't like it, delete, 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 delete. Sometimes you need to click this delete node 2 times because there are hidden nodes that are applied over here. For example, extrusion with your gizmo with the shift button will apply 2 nodes: transform geometry and extrude edge modifier. So you need to delete both of them. Delete, 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 as you can see. So that's very useful. Now, if you want to select some kind of node and delete it manually, you can also select it, shift, delete node, and it will delete this node. But I do not recommend that because it will sometimes break your geometry if you delete those nodes out of order. So since we're talking about procedural workflows, let's talk about snapshots. So for example, I have this object over here, and I like the overall shape, for example, but I want to continue editing this object. Let's harden the edges. I want to continue editing this object and leave this state behind. So what you can do is to simply duplicate it and hide it somewhere and something like that. But we have a better solution. Just save a snapshot by clicking this snapshot button and continue your editing. So for example, I want to add this detail, right? I want to bevel it somehow and stuff like that. And now I don't like this edit, for example, and for some reason I have deleted the construction history, so I cannot use delete node anymore because the delete node will only delete construction history. What I can do, I can go to my outliner, find this the name of this object over here, pcube1, and you will see that we have pcube1_sn snapshot. And you will see that we have this object over here, this snapshot object. Now, when you move your original mesh over here in the viewport, this snapshot will actually move and scale with the original object. So it will remain the same scale and the same position as you have this object. For example, if you position it somewhere in your on your mesh over here, this snapshot will also be positioned in this place. And for example, I want this snapshot, as you can see, it's here. I want this snapshot extracted. Now I just click on extract snapshot. What it will do, it will duplicate the snapshot, and now I have this original object and also my edited object without construction history. If you want to store another snapshot, just select this object, click another snapshot, and as you can see, you will have another snapshot stored here. You can apply other edits like that. And now just select the snapshot, extract, and you will have the original object still here. You can also delete the construction history right after you create a snapshot. Just hold Shift and click on the snapshot button over here. As you can see, your construction history is now gone, but you have the original object here with the construction history. So it will store it there and it will hide it. It will not be calculated by Maya and it will simply be hidden. So now let's talk about some utility functions. Those are very useful, and I use them all the time because some of them are non-existent in Maya and some of them are not very useful and I don't like how they work. So I've created this utility section over here. Snap to poly, solidify, we already talked about it, straighten, interpolate, smooth, fill. This is a new one, and smooth as well. Combine, separate, duplicate, and extract. Let's talk about those. Let's start with fill because it's the most interesting one. So we have a bunch of objects here and you will see how this fill function works. So for example, let's start with the most simple cylinder, right? We have this absolutely simple cylinder and we want to have a cap, right? But not the regular cap that we are used to, like this pole cap over here. But we want to have actually quads here and equally spaced quads, if that's possible. So what we can do, we can select this object, we can select one vertex on this open edge and click fill. So what this will do, it will fill this hole with quads and it will also try to space them, well, somewhat equally, like that. And based on your selection, so for example, I selected this vertex over here, but now if I select this vertex and click fill, you'll see that this thing rotates a little bit, and this is actually one of the corners. So you select one of the corners of this fill. As you can see now, it's rotated over here. So we can control where you place this fill function. So that's great. You can now cap cylinders with no problem. Now let's talk about just a regular cube, right? So we have this hole over here and we want to fill it with quads. In order to fill it with quads, you just select, if you just select one vertex, it will not work as you might think. Actually, it works perfectly, but I know why, because it has equal amount of rows and columns over here. So it's just pure luck. But in this instance over here, as you can see, not only this thing is curved, it also has 1, 2, 3, 4 columns and a bunch of rows over here. So if you just select one vertex, click fill, well, let's just say it does work, but it not as you might want it to. So what you can do, you can select 2 vertices instead. And what those 2 vertices will tell this algorithm, where it should place the corners of this patch, of this quad patch. So for example, I want a corner here and I want a corner over here, right? I select those vertices and fill. And as you can see, it's now filled this thing perfectly. So we can, same thing you can do over here. If you have uneven amount of rows and columns. And for example, you can also do this with cylinder. You can select 2 corners and what it will do, it will position this thing based on those 2 corners. You can also select them closer together and this will actually make slightly different fill. As you can see, just like that. Now that's all great, but can it fill this complex shape over here? As you can see, it's not only curved like that, it also has uneven number of rows and columns, and the spacing on them is also uneven. Well, let's see. We select 2 corners that we want this thing to fill, and as you can see, it's now filled perfectly. Okay, so next example. This cylinder over here, as you can see, I've cut it this way. And interestingly enough, if you select different vertices, you will get a different result in this shape over here. So for example, I want to select those 2 vertices over here and I click fill. As you can see, it will try to complete this cylinder just like that. But for example, if I select those 2 vertices and click fill, you'll see that it will try to fill this shape, but in a slightly different way, just like that. And if I select those 2, as you can see, it's a little bit different result, but this can be useful when you try to add some details to this cylindrical part and you don't want to breach everything manually. So you just need to know how this function fills the gaps like that. And also, since this function is quite heavy on the processing, if you apply this function, it will actually delete your construction history. So just be aware of that. This function is not procedural. You can undo it, of course, just like everything, but you cannot delete it like a node. It's not a node, it's just a function. So let's look at some other examples. For example, let's just click this one vertex and fill. As you can see, perfect fill. And if I select two vertices like that, it just rotates the whole shape because there's not a lot of variance it has over here to actually fill this. And the most complex example here is this sphere. Not only it has different number of rows and columns, it also has this curvature. So let's try to fill it. And as you can see, it fills the sphere without any problems. However, I will warn you, it will not be perfect. As you can see, if I look at the top of the sphere, as you can see, there's a little bit of deformation here because it smoothes those vertices a little bit. And just so you know, it's not like a panacea for everything, it's just like useful function. And for example, if I select different combination of vertices, you'll see that I will have a little bit different result over here. And I will select this like that. And as you can see, it fills it like this, as if like a small cylinder over here. And if I select a little bit different, as you can see, it does the same thing, but it changes the amount of edges it adds in the middle. So just experiment. This function is very, very powerful. It's, for example, this detail over here. Look at this. I will just select this and fill, just like that. And this fill, just like that. No problem at all. So just experiment with it. It's very fast. It's not procedural, unfortunately, but it's very useful. So now straightened, interpolate, and smooth. So the smooth is the new one, but straighten and interpolate edge was improved as well. So let's talk about straighten first. It's very simple, but it's very powerful as well. So we have this rounded part over here, and we want, for example, to straighten it, right? So we will select those edges just like that, and we will click on straighten. As you can see, it actually projects the vertices on those curved parts to a straight line between two vertices, the first one and the last one of the selection. And it also supports multiple edge groups selected. So edge group is basically a not connected edge selection. So that's great. Now, if we want those vertices to be equally spaced, we can hold Shift, straighten, and as you can see, it will now move those vertices and space them equally on those edges like that. So that's very useful. For example, if you want to straighten this thing, right? You just click straighten and straighten, straighten. I'm just pressing G to repeat my last command. Now interpolate. Interpolate is very interesting function. It will actually smoothly interpolate between 3 points. The first vertex, the middle vertex of the selection, and the last vertex. So how it works, let's see. So let's for example, do something like this, right? So this is a weird shape over here, but now I want this thing to be smoothed. Let's select this edge over here, this edge over here, and select those edges and click interpolate. And now you'll see that it tries to smooth this shape a little bit. It will not like equally space those edges like the straighten is, and it doesn't have this option, but it will try to put them so it will keep the curvature as much as possible. So just like that. And some other examples is, for example, this edge I want to interpolate. As you can see, it kind of smoothes them a little bit, just like that. So this can be very useful if you wish to have this effect. Now smooth is a little bit different. It has this smoothing power over here, which is basically a multiplier, and you can select edge groups as you select them before, and click on this the smooth function. And based on that multiplier, the amount of smoothing will be different. So if I, for example, select 99, this is the maximum, it will smooth it almost to the straight line. And if I continue this to doing this, it will just go to straight line. but you can go with a very small increments like that. For example, even 1, just like that. So straighten also has a marking menu inside of it. If you just hold right click, you'll see that we have local X, Y, and Z, and world Y, X, and Z over here. For example, if you want to do something like, you all know how to straighten the edge on the axis like that, yes, with the scale gizmo. But what you can do is to simply select edges like that, and for example, world X, right? Straighten world X, and it will try to straighten all of those edges to the X plane. So it will just snap it to the flat plane of the X coordinates, and so everything else just does the same thing, but in the world axis or local axis, and 3 different axes over here. So let's talk about combine, separate, duplicate, and extract. Those are very useful functions. They will mirror the Maya owns combine, separate, duplicate, and extract, but they will be more clean in the outliner. It will not create additional like groups and nodes in the outliner. It will just give you the object. For example, let's try to use combine from Maya, combine. As you can see, it will give you the object, but the problem is it also gives you those unnecessary groups. And now you just need to delete the construction history, and those groups will be removed. But what you can do is just to select all of the objects that you need to combine and just click combine, and it will just combine them cleanly. And also it will have construction history. So if you have some construction history before that, it will not delete it like the previous function. And also no junk in the outliner. Same goes for separate over here. If you click Maya separate over here, you'll notice that first of all it creates a folder or group, and also it renames all of the objects with polysurface. And also you need to unparent them, delete construction history, and so on and so forth. You don't need to do that, just undo, 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 undo. Come on. And you just select the object, separate, and you will have, first of all of your objects. Secondly, you still have your construction history. If you need that, you can of course delete it. And thirdly, it will not rename those objects. It will rename them based on the original object. As you can see, I have P cube, and for example, if my object, I will name it my object, right? And I will select everything else. I will combine them. As you can see, my object, it's still my object. And if I then separate it, you will see this will be my object 1, 2, 3, and 4. So very clean and outliner friendly, let's just say. Now about duplicate and extract, they are absolutely the same as the Maya ones, but as I already said, it will not create unnecessary groups in the outliner. So if you, for example, want to extract or duplicate this face selection over here, you go to Maya and duplicate faces. You duplicate those faces, and as you can see, now you have your object renamed, you have this unnecessary group, and so on and so forth. And if you even unparent it and delete the history, you will still have those objects renamed, and that's really annoying. So instead, you can just click on duplicate, and of course, it will duplicate this edge, this object over here, and it will not rename your objects over here. And as you can see, the original object is still intact. It has its own history still there, and it will not rename this object. Same goes for extract. It will just extract this face without any unnecessary groups. So now the last utility function that we're going to talk about is snap to poly. That is basically snap to polygon, and this will snap any object that you select to any polygon, and of course it will orient it as well. So we have in Maya over here snap together tool. that you can use to snap some geometry to faces of the object. But the issue with it is, first of all, it's slow. You need to select the face on the original object, on the new object, and it's just really slow. So instead, we have this snap to poly that is easy to use. And for example, let's look at this detailing over here. We have some kind of like power cells or whatever inside of this gun over here. And as you can see, they're equally spaced and they are over here added to this compartment over here, right? So let's just delete them really quickly. And you might notice that I actually have a face over here with equally spaced polygons like that. And I'm going to use this face to snap this object over here 6 times. So what you can do is you can instance this thing 5 times or even maybe 6 like that, and select those faces just like that, select those objects and click snap to poly, and that's it. You'll see that it now those power cells are now inside of this object. They are snapped and they are instanced, as you can see. But you can also do this much quicker without instancing manually. You can just select those faces, right, like that. Select the object you want, and instead of simple snap, just hold right click on snap to poly. You go to instance and snap, just like that. And now if you click snap to poly, you will see that first of all it instanced based on the amount of faces that you selected, and also it snapped all of those instanced objects to the polygon over there. Now you can just delete this construction thing like that, and they are in place. Very easy, very useful. And also you have pre-duplication. It means that it will basically duplicate one object and leave it behind, just as you can see over here. It left one object behind, so you can edit it. And if you edit this object over here, all of the instanced copies over here will also be edited. If you disable this pre-duplication, it will basically instance and snap everything to this face, to those faces, and leave nothing behind. So the last thing with snap to poly is randomization. So for example, if you add this detail over here to those polygons, just like that, you'll notice that, first of all, of course, they are instances. So if you edit this original mesh, they will be edited as well, but they are placed very uniformly, just like that. And sometimes you don't want that. So while they are selected, you can go to Instance, Randomize Transforms, and you will have this small window with some randomization parameters. For example, if you want to randomize rotations of those objects, you can enable rotation randomization, select an axis, and drag this slider. So for example, I want to randomize y-axis, and as you can see, if I drag this slider, those objects will be randomized. And if I release the slider, they will just go back. So this is just a preview of the randomization that you will have on this slider. So for example, I want this amount of randomization, and I will click randomize, and this will apply the randomization. The same thing goes with translation and scale. For example, I want to scale uniformly like that. And as you can see, if I start dragging this slider, it will basically randomize the scale of those instances. Same goes with translation. So I can just randomize their translation a little bit. And if you have everything selected and you click randomize, it will basically stack those randomizations together. So now finally, let's talk about the arrays. So we have new arrays in this update. We have linear and radial. And if we click on this linear button over here, you'll see that we have uniform and we have deformed option for the linear, and the same for radial. Also a bunch of other options over here. So let's explore. First of all, let's go with the simplest, linear uniform. I want to duplicate this object over here, this detail, and I want to duplicate it a bunch of times, procedurally, of course. So let's see, I have this axis set to Z, so what I need to do is click on -Z, And as you can see, now I have this procedural object over here that I can change the number of, if I select the object, of course, the number of copies, just like that, very simply. And also I can stretch it. I can also rotate it, but you will notice that it actually, when rotates, the original object is not rotated. That is purely intentional. You just need to enable this rotation. And now if you rotate the control curve over here, you will also rotate the object. So just like that. Now let's disable this rotation once more because we want this uniformly, and let's stretch it how we want it, just like that. And for example, add a bunch of copies, just like that. Here we go. Now the cool thing about this array is that, for example, I have this other side and I want this detail over here as well. I can just select it and instance it. Go to mirror, instance, and -x, just like that. And if I instance it here, as you can see, and then edit it in this linear array over here, you will notice that everything else here is editable as well. There are some issues with the material. This is not a problem. You just need to apply the material again. Just go to existing material or just click on this and it will fix itself. It's just a small glitch. But anyways, it is now editable. You also have a bunch of options over here. So since my camera was covering the channel box, I moved it here. And the options you have is show original. What it means is that it will reveal the original object that you can still edit, as you can see. And if you rotate it, it will rotate the array as well. It will, let's just hide it. Calculate rotation, you already saw. We can enable it here, rotation and original. You just need to select the object over here, rotation or original. As you can see, you can change it here. And you can also change the number of copies. You can stretch along curve, so you can squish it a little bit, and you can stretch it along this curve. Offset, you can offset it a little bit if you want. And also you have some other options that we'll discuss later. So offset, let's just offset it a little bit, just like that. And here we go. So this curve, actually, you can control this curve. You can control the array with this curve. And you can not only just move it and rotate it, you can also take this curve and actually move it a little bit. And you will see that those objects will follow this curve. And now you have a different setup for your array. You can also enable the rotation, and it will move. It will follow this curve, just like that. Now, to apply this array, for example, I want this array to be a normal mesh. What I can do? Let me just position it in the correct spot. I can just select this and click apply. And that's it. Now this is just a regular mesh that you can use and edit whenever you want. As you can see, just normal mesh. Now let's go to deformed linear array. As you can see, we have those pipes over here, or cables, or whatever that is. And actually, those are procedural objects. You can change the number of copies, just like that. And you can also, for example, select one of those, and if we go to the curve editing, you can actually move them and edit them, just like that. And they are fully procedural, so you can do whatever you want with them. They also have a bunch of options. We will discuss them a little bit later, but in a nutshell, what those are those simple shapes over here. Let's just copy one. And what we can do with this shape, we can apply a deformed array for them. And for example, if I do X, as you can see, it's doing something on the background. And now you have this procedural object. And what this procedural object will do, it will simply follow the curve with the amount of copies that you select. and the options that you select on it. So for example, we have this shape over here. We can move it and change it however we want, but now we can increase the amount of the number of copies. As you can see, it will now increase the copies to 6 or 7, for example. You can offset along the curve. For example, if you have only 3 copies, you can offset it to the middle of the curve, for example. You can stretch it so it will fill the entirety of the curve. It's what I did over here. You can stretch it just like that. And now if you select the curve and move it, it will not move over here, just like that. And if you increase the number of copies, of course, it will do the same thing. It will not move those ends over here. So orientation will simply rotate this shape around the curve. So we can have some kind of details and you can rotate them around. The length will change the length of this if the stretch is disabled, of course. So stretch is disabled and length can now be changed just like that. So it will basically compress the entire shape along the curve, and width will just increase the overall width of this thing. Just like that. Merge words will ensure that every word that is on the border, because remember that's just a copied instances of this thing. So it will ensure that those words are completely merged, and merge distance will just tell it the merge distance, and that's the deformed array. So that's great. Let's just go to radial arrays. So radial arrays are very simple. Uniform can be used for detailing, and deformed can be used as a replacement of radial mirror. So for example, let's go with uniform. We have a simple cube over here, and let's just apply uniform radial array. And as you can see, now we have this cube basically copied and distributed like that. And if I change this cube a little bit, it will still be over here. And I also can change the amount of copies I have over here, and also other options that you can explore or read in the documentation. Now, about the deformed array. This is a very interesting thing. It will basically try to replace lack of radial mirroring in Maya. For example, let's go to deformed and let's go to X and Y. As you can see, it constructs this object over here that you can move, rotate, or scale. And this object is procedural. If you edit this cube, for example, like that, you can see that now this object is edited as well. If you, for example, want to add some details over here, for example, offset and thickness. As you can see, now we have this detail over here, and we can also delete this face. You'll see that it will update the radial array over here, and you can change the number of copies as well. Now let's see the options. Curvature will change the curvature the curvature of this thing, as you can see. So we can change the curvature of this. The default is 180. Low bound will basically unwind this thing just like that, and high bound will do the opposite on the other side, just like that, and you can do both of them. Radius will change the radius of this thing, as you can see. You can change, even flip this thing, but the normals will be flipped as well. And merge will ensure that all of those pieces are merged together. And also, as I already said, you can just scale it or position it wherever you want. So another very interesting function of linear array is multi-array. So what you can do, you can select a bunch of objects like those and create an array from them. Something like this. So now you'll see that all of those objects are in an array and they are connected basically to curve controller over here. So what you can do is now you can move this controller and do whatever you want with it, and all of those objects will follow this one curve. Now, more than that, you can also add and remove objects from this array. For example, I want to remove the cylinder from this array. What I need to do is to select the cylinder and click this minus button over here. And that's it. As you can see, the cylinder will be removed and array will rearranged as if the cylinder never existed. The same thing, you can add the cylinder back. For example, if I select this array, I select this cylinder and I click plus. And as you can see, this cylinder was added to the last slot of this array. Basically, this is a repeating linear array. Now, you can do whatever you want with this array. The same thing as you can do with a normal uniform array. You can change the number of copies, but also there are a bunch of new things that you can have here. If you look at your channel box over here, you will see that we have multi-array controls. And over here we have pattern and randomize pattern. And that means that you can actually change this pattern. As you can see, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. But you can change this to something else. For example, 1, 2, 3, 3. Then 1, 2, 3, 3. And as you can see, it's now a little bit different. You can also randomize this pattern. This will basically randomize the objects that are added to this curve. Now, that's all great, but can you do this with deformed array? Yes, of course you can do it. So let's just check how to do this. We have the same number of objects, and let's go to deformed and click on X, for example, right? So it will create the array for you. And here you go, the same thing, but with a deformed array. Now, if you change this array a little bit, you will see that those objects are now deforming along with this curve. And the same thing goes for plus and minus. You can remove and you can also add things to this array. Now let's talk about some other configurations that you can use with multi-array function. For example, I want a string and I want some other objects on this string, for example, like beads or something like that, or some kind of necklace, right? So I want a deformed array that will be my string, and I want uniform array that will be my parts of my necklace, for example, right? So let's see, I want to use this cylinder for my string over here, and I will just click on deformed array. I will click X to create a line on X-axis, just like that, and I will make it a little bit bigger, and also I will enable stretch along curve, so it will be stretched on the curve over here. Now, if I want, for example, to add something to this array, I can just click and add like this. This will create another deformed. Let's just demonstrate. If I click plus on this cylinder, you'll see that it did add this cylinder to this array, but we don't want that. We want different type of array. We want uniform array. So what we need to do, we need to go back one step. We need to select the curve that is inside over here, and we also need to select those objects. Switch to uniform, for example, and create. You can click on any of those axes as long as you have the curve selected. It will follow the curve. Let's click on the axis. And as you can see, now we have something different. So first of all, let me just change some options so it will be easier to see. The smaller amount of copies here. And as you can see, now we have a complex object with this array. So for example, if I now want to select the control curve and move this, you will notice that the control curve is the string over here, the string curve, is deforming, but the objects on top of it are not. So now this is the complex object that you can place anywhere you want, and also you can actually edit individual components of this multi-array, just like that. As you can see, if I change, for example, the scale of this, it will change this final thing as well. So very easy, and you also can do the same thing that I've talked about. You can remove objects from the array, just like that. You can remove them, and as you can see, we have only spheres left. I can also add objects back to this array, just select them like that and add them back. And also, as I already told you, just select the curve and continue your editing. So this can be very interesting thing when you actually create some kind of necklaces and stuff for your characters, or even some complex pipes or cables. Now the last thing about the arrays is some form of randomization that you want. For example, I will create a multi-array. We already discussed what it is. And I want to randomize those shapes a little bit. For example, a little bit of rotation, a little bit of scale and stuff like that. We have array randomization section over here in the channel box. If you select the array, you can go and increase the randomization magnitude a little bit. For example, let's go for 1 and let's start randomizing stuff. For example, I want to randomize transforms. And as you can see, as I move the randomization, you'll see that objects will randomly move around a little bit based on that magnitude and those numbers over here. For example, I want also to randomize rotation. As you can see, I will randomize those rotations a little bit. Now, for example, you don't like this randomization, you can go to random seed over here. It will be a random number each time, and you can change it. And as you can see, it will basically give you a bunch of different randomization states over here. Same goes with the scale. You can randomize scale as you want. So now that we've talked about utility functions, new arrays and stuff like that, let's go to materials over here. So those are material slots that you can use to store your materials, your custom materials, and they work this way. For example, you see I have 4 materials and a bunch of empty slots over here. If I want to add a material to a slot, what I can do, I can hold right click on right mouse button over here and select a bunch of options. For example, I can create Maya material, I can select from scene materials, or I can create matcap material. So that's cool. Let's try to create a normal Maya material. It will open a window and I want Blinn, for example. And as you can see, I have this here. And if I open channel box and click shift, click on this node, I can change options for the Blinn. As you can see, it's now red. Now, if I want to apply this material to objects, I just select the objects and I click, and that's it. It's now applied. Great. Now, if I, for example, really like this material that I've created and I want to save it as a preset, I can do that. I can just hold right click, save preset, and let's name it my Blinn material. Okay. It will now create this material and save it in the folder that I will show you a little bit later. And now if you want to load this thing in any scene, you can just go to Manage Presets, and you will see my Blinn material over here. You import it, and here you go. Now we have 2 of the same materials in this scene, and you can import it to other scenes as well. So let's say you want to update the plugin, but you don't want to lose your materials that you've created over here in the custom material slots. You can go to Documents Maya, your version of Maya, Scripts, Toolbox, and over here you'll find the folder named Presets. And you can go over here and you will see that you have pairs of files over here, Maya binary file and PNG file. So those are your materials. So if you want to save those materials somewhere and just update the plugin and then paste them, you can totally do that. You just need to save this presets folder somewhere and then delete this toolbox folder and just transfer the preset folder back to your new version of Toolbox. So that's very easy. So another example, I have a more complex texture over here. If I just apply it, you will see. Of course, my UVs are broken here, but let's just look at this object. This is a checker material. This is just a file that I've added as a texture, the color. And let's say I want this preset saved. So I will just save it like my checker material. I will save it, and let's go to a new scene. Completely new scene. You will see that none of the materials are here. And let's just go to the sphere, for example, and manage presets. You will see I have my blend material. I have my checker material here. So I will just import it. It's now imported in this scene. And what I can do is just simply apply it. And if we enable the textures, you will see that although it's a custom material with a file, you will see that it actually now in this scene. And also I can just take my red blend material over here and click it, and that's it, as you can see. Now the other useful thing is matte caps. As you can see, this material is a little bit different over here. It's actually a matte cap material capture. So it will mimic the lighting on the material. It's basically a material with baked lighting, and it looks something like this. Let's apply it. As you can see, it looks something like this. And if I, for example, subdivide this thing, let's just subdivide everything that can be subdivided here. And as you can see, the subdivided mesh over here looks a little bit different with this material capture matte cap material. And if we, for example, select, this is a very dense mesh, by the way, so that's why it lags so much. And we, for example, select this material, change it to this material, you will see that we now have a different material and a different look. Now, the cool thing about this menu is that you can select global materials. What that means is every object that you create or every object that doesn't have assigned material will have this global material assigned to it by default. For example, right now I have this blend material as a global material, and if I select let's just unsubdivide this because it's very heavy on my CPU. Let's just, for example, create a cylinder, and you will notice that if I try to smooth it, you will notice that this is indeed the same blend material that I have this here selected as global shader. So every slot can be selected as global shader. And if I, for example, change global shader to material capture, just like that, every material that doesn't have material applied will have this matte cap material now. Same goes for other materials as well. Now, clear slot will just clear this slot, but it will not actually delete the material. So you can always go back to select from scene materials, or in your hypershade you can see those materials like that. You can select them from your scene, and here you go. And same goes with material capture, and put them back over here into this slot. So to create matte cap material, the only thing that you need to do is to click on this button, and it will open a menu where you need to select this image of this material capture material. Select this option and open your matte cap. That's it. You can find them in the internet. Now let's talk about Booleans and Booleans with instance plus. So those are very useful things. Let's just create a simple cube like this. And you all know what Booleans are, but in Maya they are a little bit, let's just say, simplistic and limited. So if you just, for example, try to do something like this, you will notice that now we have this thing cut, and we have a new and interesting shape that we can actually modify. For example, I want to add a bevel over here, right? And I also want to extrude this part like that. And as you can see, everything is now editable. You can just do this like that. And for example, I want to add another detail here like that. And I also want to add a cylinder here, but this cylinder will actually be added to this mesh. So I want to do this. And now the cylinder is baked into this mesh like that. And we will cut, for example, the cylinder from the top, just like that. And so on and so forth. So Booleans are mostly useful for like quick iterations, quick concepting and stuff like that. They're not really useful when you want some clean geometry, because you will still need to fix this geometry. As you can see, it's not greatest edge flow and stuff like that. It's basically non-existent. So be aware of that. But with this those functions, you can quickly iterate through Booleans and you can add your shapes really fast. So, for example, I don't like this one, right? And I don't like this one as well. I can just go here and delete Boolean cutter, right? And now it's gone. So we can also delete those shapes if we don't want them. We can also quickly hide them with toggle group. We can, for example, if I hide some of them, we can quickly show cutters. It will show everything. We can quickly select them. And we can quickly apply Booleans to this mesh. And now it's just normal mesh, nothing special. Just like that. So Booleans are great, very useful, very easy to use. Also, this triangle over here indicates that if you want, for example, for Boolean to be hidden right away after this command, just hold Shift and it will just hide the cutter. But it's still there, you just show cutters and here it is. So the last thing about Booleans is Boolean attributes. So if you select any cutter over here, you will notice that you have 3 new options here, 3 new attributes. Boolean, Boolean operation, and Boolean classification. So Boolean is simply a toggle that will enable and disable the Boolean cutter. Over here, as you can see, it's now disabled. Boolean operation will change the Boolean operation that is applied to this cutter. Intersection, for example, will change this completely. And edge classification, Boolean classification, I mean, it's edge and normal, and the difference is how it treats one-sided geometry. For example, if I apply Boolean using this plane, you will see that this plane is basically cutting the object completely. But if I go here and change classification from edge to normal, for example, you will notice that this edge will now simply cut this geometry and it will not delete this other half of the geometry, basically. So that's the difference, and those are the Boolean attributes. You can change them anytime, you can bypass them, very useful. Now let's talk about Booleans in context of instance plus. For example, if you want to modify this cube somehow, and you want this procedural modifier of instance plus with mirror, you can do that. You just apply this instance plus, go to instance, -x, for example. Let's enable this so we can see -y, -z, for example. And if we now go to this cube and try to, for example, Boolean this, you will notice that now this is a procedural mirror, and now it will Boolean all of the sides, just like that. You can just use 2-sided mirror or 4-sided mirror, whatever you want. So you can just do this. And for example, if you go and do something in the middle, it will just be the middle. Come on, select. Just like that. So let's talk about some simple functions, some additional simple functions that we have over here. For example, dot selection. So if you want to select a pattern of faces, but you don't want to click them manually like that, what you can do is you can use dot selection. For example, select 2 faces like that and click dot select, and it will just complete the pattern that you have here. What you can also do is to select 2 faces, for example, hold Shift and click on dot select, and it will select the entire face loop over here. Same goes here, and so on and so forth. So you can select any pattern that you wish with any gap over here. So it works just like that. No issues. So that's great. Dot select is very simple. Now constraints. Transform constraints and selection constraints. So transform will enable the transformation constraints. For example, if you try to move your vertex now, it will now slide on those edges just like that. And this is controlled by this marking menu, constraint to edge, constraint to surface. So it was available in Maya before, so you just control shift and slide across the edges just like that. But if you want this thing to be enabled all the time, just select this transform constraint, or you can constrain to surface. For example, now this vertex will slide on the surface of those faces. If you click on this select constraint, it will basically constrain the selection based on angle or based on camera, and also both over here. So let's select by angle, and our default angle tolerance is 1 degree. So as you can see, it's very easy to select flat surfaces like that with this angle selection, and it will all, be very easy to modify more dense geometry like that. You can also increase this angle over here up to 45 or custom, or you can select auto camera based selection. That means that everything that your camera sees will be selected. So for example, if I do this, it will select all of those verts, but not the backside. So this is just a regular Maya function. It's just, it can be enabled constantly just using this one button over here. Now, wireframe toggle and reference toggle is very simple concept. Wireframe will just enable wireframe on the selected objects, so it's not global. As you can see, all of the other objects are just regular geometry with shading, but this wire toggle will enable they enable the wireframe on the selected objects only, and reference will disable the selectability of the objects. So for example, if you use something like create and image plane, free image plane, and you use some kind of reference, you can just quickly select it and enable the reference toggle. To disable, just find it in the outliner, it's highlighted green like that, and disable it. That's it. So now let's talk about the selection sets. We have 20 selection sets over here, selection groups as they called here, and you can actually add objects or components in those groups. You just select the components or objects and add to this group. You select other, you add to this group, and select something else, you add to this group. And now by clicking on those groups, you will return back to the selection that you had before. And that's very useful. You can also select components, individual components on the objects. So for example, something like that. And when you select on this, you will go back to this selection, just like that. There are options available. You can merge to this group, you can clear group, and other options as well. So for example, if I select everything and I say merge to this group, what it will do, it will find those objects in other groups and it will move them into this first group. So they will be deleted from the previous groups and moved to this. I can also just add selection to this group. So this will not delete those objects from other groups. I can remove the selection from this group, and as you can see now, this is empty. I can remove this selection and add something else, for example, like that. I can also toggle the visibility of this group. As you can see, it toggles the visibility of some of them based on the selection, and also visibility of the faces as well. And I also can toggle and the reference of those objects. And those objects will now not be selectable in the outliner, just like that, and toggle references back. And now they are selectable as well. So that's selection groups, very simple concept, very useful when you need to select something else, but you want to return back to your previous selection. And one of the last functions that we'll cover today is live plane, switch to cam, and align, and also resolution slider over here. So this will basically add a live plane with this live modifier added on the face that you select. So this is very useful. For example, I want to select this face. I will create a, come on, this face, please. I will create the live plane on this face. Select only one face because, as you saw before, I've selected multiple and it just picked one. So select this. I selected this face. I've added this live plane, and now, as you can see, it is aligned to this face. Now, what I can do with this live plane, I can change some of the options. I can rotate it just like that. I can rotate it like that, as you can see. If you wish to do that, I can scale it in one axis. It's only uniform. I can change the offset. So by default, it has offset over here, but you can also change it to 0 and it will lie on the face like that. I can also move this grid X and Y. For example, oops. For example, if I want to move it to the right and like that, I can also move it like that. Now, what's the use for this plane, you might ask? Well, very easy. You can now create objects on that live plane and they will be aligned to that plane. However, there are some limitations. Let's just disable it. For example, if my object is rotated like that, right, and I want to add my live plane over here, it will work just fine. But as you can see, it's a little bit skewed. I can just rotate it a little bit like that manually. But now, if I add cube over here like that, you'll see that it doesn't align to this object properly. But what we can do is to click align, and now this cube will be perfectly aligned to this live plane, and we can now do whatever we want with it. For example, Boolean, just like that. And this is very useful with Booleans. So we can do something like this. As you can see on the object like that. We can now disable it, and here we go. So for example, if I want to switch to the camera that is aligned to that live plane, I can do that. I'll just create this live plane like that and switch to camera, just like that. And now, as you can see, this camera is aligned to that plane. So that's very useful. Also, I can change the resolution of this live plane by simply dragging this slider right here. Just as you can see, you can go as dense as you want, or just like that. So very useful for Booleans, for aligning objects. So now just a quick overview of the options. We have a bunch of options here. If you click on this, you can update quick selection groups. If for some reason you've added something to selection groups and it's not highlighted, or something else happens, just click on this button. It will update those groups manually. You can also delete everything from those selection groups. I mean, not the objects, but just the selection groups themselves. You can clear selection groups, and groups hidden in outliner will simply hide them from the outliner, so you won't see them and they will not bother you. Clear custom materials will just remove materials from those custom slots. It will not remove the materials themselves. Edge highlight color will simply change the color of the highlight when you, for example, have this angle enabled. So multi-Boolean algorithm, merged, optimized, and advanced. Those are algorithms that you can read in the documentation. They are only for using Boolean on multiple objects. So it's pretty advanced. By default, it's in optimized mode, and you should probably leave it there if you doing regular Booleans. So Boolean wireframe output, this option will output a mesh in wireframe mode after the Boolean command, and it can be useful in some cases, covered in the documentation. Automatic Boolean instances conversion will convert instances for Boolean operations. So if you have instances, it will convert them to normal mesh, or it will ask you if you have some other algorithm enabled that actually supports instancing. Additive creasing will for example, if you have mesh with some shape like that, and you have crease, you've manually creased those edges, right? If you now enable Crease Plus, as you can see, it will not replace the previously creased edges. But if you enable additive crease, if you disable additive creasing and crease, as you can see, it will first delete all of the creasing on the mesh and then apply the crease by angle. So by default it's enabled, and you should probably use it like that. Crease uncrease only face perimeter is basically will invert the shift parameter of this crease and uncrease. For example, if I hold shift, it will now crease the inside edges, but if I unselect this option and now hold shift, it will only uncrease the outer edges. So it basically inverses this shift function for crease and uncrease. By default, it's enabled. Those are just utility too many instances check and too many edges selection selected check. So that's it for the options. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. It's quite a few things to cover in this tutorial, and if you have any questions, you can always go to the documentation and read about it, or just ask me in the Discord server. Also in the description you will find links to where to buy this plugin and other useful things. Also, all of the chapters of this video are also there, timestamps, so you can just click around and find the question that you are interested in. And yeah, so thank you for watching and have a great day.